Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode. We are officially back. I know it's been a while, but it's kind of a slow period for us. But we do have some news for you guys, so we all jumped on and decided to hop on the pod. But appreciate you guys for tuning in on all platforms. Once again, I am your host, Marcus. I'm not here alone. I got my guys with me. I got Colts Film Room and Landon. Colts Film Room, how are we doing?
I'm good, man. How are you?
Pretty good, pretty good. Can't complain. Long week. Landon on the opposite side, how we doing?
Well, you said it. Long week, right? It's been a long week, but it's almost over with. Yeah, doing great. Other than that, doing great.
That's good to hear, man. Appreciate you guys for tuning in once again. We see you guys here live on the Twitter side of things and on the YouTube side. We got some news. The Colts went out there and found themselves a defensive coordinator in Lou Anarumo. He's had himself a journey, so we're going to go ahead and hop into that and get our thoughts and reactions on that. If you guys have reactions to it as well, feel free to comment in the comment section if you guys are watching this live. And if you're watching this post, go ahead and share it as well. We do see those comments after those as well. But Lou Anarumo had himself a journey. I do have it here. Just give you guys a resume of where he started pretty much from 89 to now. Went out there from Wagner, running backs coach, and then in 1991, Syracuse. He went to 92-94. In Syracuse, he was a graduate assistant and assistant defensive backs coach. 92 to 94, he was a merchant marine. He was a defensive coordinator there and a defensive backs coach. 95 to 2000, he was Harvard assistant head coach, defensive back special team. 2001 to 2003, from Marshall, defensive backs coach. 2004 to 2011, Purdue, defensive back coach. 2012 to 2017, Miami Dolphins, defensive back coach. 2015, he was Miami Dolphins intern defensive coordinator. 2018, New York Giants defensive back coach. 2019, as of recently, Cincinnati Bengals defensive coordinator. And as of now, he landed in Indianapolis. He had himself a journey, and I got to get my guys' reaction on this through this news. Of course, a lot of people were 50-50. A lot of people, there was a lot of options out there. Of course, a lot of people was talking to Dennis Allen, Wink Martindale, things of that nature, but the Colts wound up getting this guy. Of course, he had his history of the Indianapolis Colts, talking about those times when he was at Purdue, listening to the games on the radio, things of that nature. So, Colts film room, when the Colts went and got Lou Anarumo, what was your thoughts?
Well, I know some people had asked me to like rank them or do any of that, and I didn't want to do that, mainly because the one thing that I really liked was the process in this. Why is Landon? I was laughing at that earlier. A lot of times in these defensive coordinator or coordinator interviews, you get the guy that they've kind of been targeting. It's not a legitimate search. It's someone that they've targeted, and it moves quickly. There's not a lot of options that they're considering. And I thought that sometimes that does. Oh my God. See, this is what I'm saying. Like Landon like throws me off like while I'm getting it. Anyway, I thought that the process that the Colts went through to find the defensive coordinator was just as good as the candidate that they landed on. I think when you looked at where they were at after Gus Bradley, they needed to find the right person, and that person isn't always just your buddy. And I think that sometimes what we've seen, and I'm not saying it's the wrong way to do it necessarily for those teams, like in San Francisco and Cincinnati, where it's clearly not this same type of search. I thought this is the search that the Colts needed. They needed to bring in guys like Wink Martindale, like Dennis Allen, like Lou Anarumo, give themselves plenty of options and plenty of quality candidates to consider. So I think ultimately I was happy on the candidate, but I was more importantly happy on the process to get there.
Okay, I like that. Linda, what was your thoughts? I know you was up in the fence about, Wink Martindale and those things, but what was your thoughts on Lou Anarumo coming to Indianapolis?
Yeah, I mean, I was fine with it. Sorry, I got you off track. I was just answering the question. They had asked how many Pokemon Happy Meals I'd gotten so far. Just answering the question. But as far as the Lou Anarumo hire, I mean, I'm good with it. I'm kind of in the same place, not necessarily like the process, but just really like the guys that they targeted as far as the philosophy goes, because it's so far opposite of what they've had, even going back under like Matt Eberflus. It's really like it goes against everything Chris Ballard truly believes in on the defensive side of the ball, which tells me Shane Steichen made the hire, which is how it should be, honestly. As the head coach of the team, he should be able to pick his coordinators, and they did allow him to do that, so that's good. But yeah, for years, if you've listened to the show, Marcus knows, I have hated the approach on the defensive side of the ball as far as, the whole underneath, like we're going to give quick, or, we're going to give up the easy completion to prevent the explosive plays. We're going to, rally and gang tackle and all that kind of stuff. It's very passive. It basically has been a huge issue, honestly, too, because not only have they given up, the easy completions and the career games for multiple quarterbacks, with completion percentage and yards and all that kind of stuff, but they haven't actually particularly done well at stopping the explosives either. And a lot of that has to do with personnel, but it's really just the philosophy. I just hate setting back and letting basically the offense dictate how the game goes. And I've said that on here for years. So the fact that these are the type of guys they went after, guys like Wink Martindale, who was a guy that I was really high, like I've wanted him here, for years. But even like Lou Anarumo, who's not quite as blitz happy as, Wink Martindale, but is very much into the disguise coverages and all that kind of stuff, using the chess pieces, moving them around the board. It's not just static. Like, it's not like this is what we're going to play. The quarterbacks know what we're going to play. Boom, here you go. And like, to Gus Bradley's credit, he did try different things, but
I would say that he had his moments.
Yeah,
he certainly had his moments. I think it's not characterizing his tenure to not say that this was like
we're only sticking cover 3.
Yeah. Like, I don't think that's just not fair.
He tried different things, but even then, he's not one to really like disguise and use the defensive line and have them drop back into coverage and rush linebackers. And what was crazy is, and I've said this too, is that's really an area where, like, the few times they did do it, this defense actually really excelled. Like, Zaire Franklin was phenomenal at rushing the passer on blitzes. Like, and he just wasn't.
They had a really nice third down. They had a nice third down pressure package for sure, especially with the depth. I think you saw it in Houston that first week. I was really excited about where they were kind of going to build off of that. And they really, they needed DeForest Buckner to make that thing go. So you kind of saw a little bit less of it. But yeah, they definitely did in the beginning of the year and certain times. So I agree with you that I don't think it's overall as simple as it gets in the NFL. It's not close, but like, to say that it was like, he literally just said, we're going to play over cover 3 every single time. That's just not obviously how they were doing.
And a lot of that was personnel issues too, especially on the back end. Like, I tweeted it out, maybe even it was either a year or two ago. It's been at least a season. But, Gus Bradley, the only time in his career he's had top 10 defensive units was when he's had multiple Pro Bowlers or all pro players in the secondary. Obviously, that goes against Chris Ballard's philosophy, which is
get Pro Bowl players.
Getting Pro Bowl players in general. But specifically on defense, he wants to pour so much of the resources into the defensive line, and we'll just hope that
and we'll talk about that.
And we'll get into that here in a little bit. But this hire really kind of goes in the complete opposite direction of what Chris Ballard believes in on the defensive side of the ball. And to me, that's a good thing. And it's something that I've clamored for. So whether it was going to be Dennis Allen, whether it was going to be Lou Anarumo, whether it was going to be Wink Martindale, I'm fine with either one of them. I think they're all good coaches in their own right. They do things differently. They're aggressive. They confuse defense or offenses. They get after, they try to disguise things and make it just to where it's just not so easy to sit back there and just pick apart zone coverages all day. So, I was fine with any of the guys they brought in. That being said, which we'll talk about here in a minute, it's not really about the defensive coordinator hire. It's much more about the personnel, and we'll get into that, I'm sure, in a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And, that goes into question. After the last cycles of defensive coordinators that the Colts had, you mentioned 1,000 times that, the players are still the same on the roster, and the ranks of the defenses just gets worse and worse. And at a point, it gets to like, how much are you going to continue to blame the coaches, and when are we going to start pointing at the players? You start and you bring in a new defensive coordinator in Lou, and you got these players, and maybe going into free agency. Who are some players that you may think we could start with Landon that can possibly flourish in this scheme that Lou's going to bring that's already on the roster?
Oh, that are already on the roster? Well, there's like a couple guys really that kind of jump out to me. The first one, I think is the most obvious and the one that you probably see talked about most often on the internet is Kenny Moore. Based on the way that Lou Anarumo uses the slot. It's actually in a weird way very kind of a throwback to the way Matt Eberflus used Kenny Moore in the slot. Very multiple, very multi-tool. He blitzed him. And Lou Anarumo with Mike Hilton, and Mike Hilton is one of, the most talented slot players in the NFL. I think Kenny Moore is right at that level, if maybe not even a little bit better. I think Kenny Moore instantly makes a bigger impact. I'm not saying that he wasn't making an impact already, but I think his role just increased even more. And I think he's going to get a chance to do a little, show a little bit more of things that make him a special player. The other one that I don't really see people talk about, and I know this might be a little bit of a long stretch because we don't know how free agency is playing out. We don't know who they're bringing back, but a guy that I really would love to see kind of take the reins and the opportunity, and that I think can have a really big role in this defense is actually Jalen Carley's.
Dude, it's like you steal my God. There's no way he's choosing. All right.
Yeah. I thought it from the moment the hire was announced. The moment the hire was announced, I instantly, and I might have even tweeted it out. I don't know because the internet's just a place of mayhem. But that's actually the first name that popped into my head when the announcement was hired was Jalen Carley's. And he's almost built perfectly for what they want to do in the middle of the field with Lou Anarumo in this defense. And like I said, we don't know if EJ Speed is going to be back. We don't know if they draft a linebacker. There's still so many things that are unknown going into this, but I think that he has a chance. And
they're not going to blindly hand him the job.
They're not going to. Well, they shouldn't hand anybody the job, right? That's the motto.
Well, they can hand.
That's part of the problem on why they
can hand DeForest Buckner the 3-tech role. That's fine with me if they want to hand DeForest Buckner.
Yeah, you can hand DeForest Buckner the job, but I just think that Jalen Carley's has a chance to be a real impact player for this defense moving forward.
I agree. Those are obviously my first two. I think everyone will tell you Kenny Moore, right? And you don't have to look hard to go find that. I think a lot of what we do is we think, oh, good player, gonna play good with new good defensive coordinator, and we just do that mental math.
Yeah, DeForest Buckner is probably going to be a good player.
He's probably going to be fine. The one thing that I would say is I think it's early with where the Colts are at because they're probably going. I mean, right now, I think I can peg in 5 guys on an 11-person defense that are for sure going to be here. It's maybe 6 or 7. When you think about the starters, it's tough because this thing can go a lot of different ways. The one thing that I always respected that Eric DeCosta, who's the general manager for the Ravens, said about free agency is it's a irrational market. So you can go in and think you have something locked down and you think you have a target that something happens. And then when you don't get that guy, then there's that urge to panic. And then you start becoming irrational in a lot of these things. I wish I could find that clip because I thought it was so insightful about it, where it's it's the Colts are going to go into free agency with a board similar to they do with the draft of the guys that they're targeting and want to acquire. But that thing can go a billion different ways, unlike the draft. The draft, they know where they're picking. They choose their selection. That guy's going to come play for you, right? Now you can trade up and down the board, but for the most part, it's there. With free agency, there's so many other variables at hand. So I think there's going to be so much roster turnover for me to say potentially for me to say like, oh, all these guys that struggled, the new defensive coordinator is just going to change everything. Because I think the fact that they didn't have the horses at times was probably a part of the reason that it wasn't just the scheme. I don't think magically you get Lou Anarumo, who's going to change the picture. I think in a lot of ways, and I think this is really important to point out because I do think the Colts did land one of the more coveted guys out there, despite how it ended. I'm not expecting this unit to be good in September, and I'm probably not expecting them to be good until mid-October, because when you think about it, they're playing in the simplest defensive scheme in the NFL. They're going to get a whole new system, which changes so many things. And it's especially on defense, you need that synergy that's a little bit different on offense. On offense, you execute the play and you run the route that you're told in the playbook. And it's very keen on the details. And you can see these offenses just explode right away. With defenses, what I want to see is just this. Like, they don't have to start out good in September. You'd love for them to do enough to break the week 1 streak, but like, they don't have to start right here. And I don't think it's realistic for them to start right here because they're learning an entirely new system coming from one of the more simpler schemes in the NFL. So there's
not only that, but this system too that they're getting in, where we've seen a lot of areas of issue with this Colts defense has come in communication breakdowns on the
exactly
back end, right?
And they're going to probably play with new players too. So
yeah, and this defensive scheme and what he asks you to do. There is so much whenever you do start getting into the more aggressive and more confusing and multiple type of stuff, there's so much communication that has to happen on the, from the linebackers to the back, specifically the back end, that it's going to take time. And that's really where we've seen a lot of these guys struggle, is with blown coverages and these explosive plays, is not communicating and somebody being out of position. And then all that, they're going to be asked to do that more than ever moving forward.
So, and that's why it's like, I'm going to set a reminder. I'm just going to make this my new pin tweet, is that like, all I can ask from Lou Anarumo in a year that everyone is claiming is a lame duck. With Jim Irsay, I just never know. But for all intents and purposes, they need results soon. All I ask for Lou Anarumo is we're moving this way. Right? Like, I can't asking him to put to field.
Well, you need to reverse it this way.
What did I do? Oh,
well, it's the way you're going. You're going from up. It's just the camera. I'm just messing with you. It's the way
I got you.
You're going up to down.
You know what everyone? Yeah, everyone knew it. Like,
yeah, you need to go. You need to start here and go up.
Yeah, like I'm expecting some probably a lot of mental errors at first from good players too, probably. I mean, now listen, like, it's the NFL, like, these guys are veterans. A lot of these guys are going to be playing on their 3rd system in Indianapolis. So it's not like this is all for nothing, but like, I don't think it's reasonable for me to expect them to be good until mid-October. And we say that about a lot of teams. It's like offense and defense. So I think it'll be interesting to see who they acquire and how aggressive they are in doing so for this defense, because I think one of the things that we'll talk about, and we can just talk about it now, is the amount of dime personnel that Lou Anarumo plays. And that's something that the Colts really, I'd have to go look at the Eberflus numbers, to be honest with you, but they haven't ever played dime really under Gus Bradley, unless it was prevent defense, end of half type stuff, where it's like they are passing, they have 3rd and 15 plus, the clock plays a factor, we'll go play dime, and it's only big dime, meaning that's how Rodney.
I was going to say, like, can you explain what that is to the
viewer? So yeah,
people might not know. They hear dime and they think it's like they're playing with 10 players. Why are they doing that?
So dime is obviously, nickel defense, where you have the nickel corner come in for that 3rd linebacker. Dime would take, in the Colts case, probably EJ Speed off the field and put on another defensive back. That could be a safety, where you get big dime, and then regular dime is when you would add that 4th corner. So it'd either be 4 corners or 3 safeties, however you want to do it. And you can play up front it's normally 3-2. I mean, there's different ways. There's infinite ways, right, that you can match personnel. But Lou likes to bring in extra DBs to come play. So, and the Colts really haven't had that when they do that on the 53-man roster. Like, it's been 10 defensive linemen. They've invested a lot more. And normally you see teams go 10 offensive linemen, 10 defensive linemen, but they're going to have to do things differently, because you can't roll into training camp with 5 DBs. I think it was, or maybe it was 5 corners, 3 safeties. Is that what it was? Yeah. I forgot. So someone can pull up the numbers, but a lot of those guys,
and none of those guys didn't make it past week 3.
Exactly. So like that can't happen. And so that's why I know Landon can probably go on a spiel about how the secondary needs to be the first thing that this team addresses. I'm there for quantity purposes just as much as quality. Like, we can argue about the talent that they have in the room right now all we want, but literally out of necessity, they need more guys that you can trust on the field, because they don't have it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's going to be. That's what I was saying, is like this hire flies completely in the opposite direction of the way Chris Ballard has really constructed this defense over his tenure. And so much is going to be placed on the personnel side of things, to execute this defense. You are going to have to now make the secondary a priority. This is no longer, we're going to keep building the defensive line, and we're just going to piece together, undrafted free agents, 7th rounders. It's going to be our secondary, and we're rolling in there with all these guys that probably not necessarily can't, but there's a good chance they won't work out. Like, I mean, there's a big reason why undrafted free agents are undrafted, generally. And Chris Ballard has it like, Jones, that's a good pick. Kenny Moore, undrafted free agent, that's a good pick. But you can't just constantly rely on that. You are actually going to have to invest resources.
And he's done it in the past. Yeah, he really has. Like, I look toward one of the best free agents that I think the Colts have probably brought in my opinion. I don't know if it goes talked about enough. Xavier Rhodes. This was a guy that was a veteran corner that had played really well in Minnesota. They had written him off, and he brought in, and he played really good football for the most part for that 1 year he was in. I think it was 1 year. 1 year that he was in Indianapolis.
Well, it was 2. I think he was injured. The second.
Oh, it was 2. It was 2.
I think it was 2 years.
And he's done this in a couple spots. Obviously with Rodney McLeod. I think
Stephon Gilmore.
Stephon Gilmore's another great one as well. And it's
Stephon Gilmore single-handedly won them like 2 games.
Yeah, exactly. And I think he's done this with like guys before. Like, I don't think that there's no precedent that Chris Ballard has never invested in. Where Chris Ballard has frankly gone wrong for a guy who claims to be a DB expert is just the amount of guys he's missed on the draft. Like, from I mean, you can
one of Landon's favorites last year.
Who was the one last year? The Marsh. Who?
You mentioned the DB last year, Landon, that didn't get in the draft.
Oh, Quinyon Mitchell.
Quinyon Mitchell. Yeah. So, like, here's my thought about the DB position real quick, and this is a little bit of a tangent because I see a question about some good vets. And obviously, like we had talked about, like, the free agency is just this irrational market, so it can go. It's hard to do like free agency predictions, to be quite honest with you, because the Colts could really target a guy like Javon Holland or Greenlaw that you're saying, but so could another team, and they can outbid you, and you can have a situation reportedly like Danielle Hunter where you offer the most amount of money, but he goes somewhere else anyway. So
here's the key though, and this is where I think that they've missed on quite a few guys. And this, I don't want to get fully into this, but the name of the game in free agency now is not total money, right? I mean, you can offer a guy more total money.
Yeah,
So the number you're looking at in free agency, really the last few years, you've really seen this huge market shift, and it's all about guaranteed money. That's the name of the game. That's what matters. Guaranteed money. That is the one place the Colts have really been reluctant to really grow in their push for free agency. So I see it all the time about the Danielle Hunter thing. Well, the Colts offered Danielle Hunter more money. He chose to go on to Houston. Correct. Technically correct. They did offer him more total money. Houston offered him more guaranteed money. That is what really matters. So in the end game, if somebody tells you, I mean, this is just like at your job. If somebody tells you, hey, we're going to we're going to offer you a brand new position, right? And we're going to give you, for the next 3 years, we're going to give you $150,000, but only 75,000 is guaranteed. But you can earn up to 150,000. You're gonna be like, oh, okay. I mean, like, yeah, that's cool. But then another company comes to you and they say, hey, we're gonna offer you 3 years, 130,000 total. So it's $20,000 less total, but we're gonna offer you 125,000 of that money guaranteed. You're gonna get it regardless of how you do or not. What position? What offer are you taking? You're going to take 125 guaranteed. So that's really the name of the game. And I think Chris Ballard actually talked about this in his presser. Maybe not guaranteed money, but I think he alluded to it where he says, I need to get better about closing deals and kind of pushing over where I'm comfortable, going in and making sure that we can get these deals closed. Because the Danico Autry thing, the whole reason Danico Autry left, they haggled over a couple $1 million of guaranteed money. Just a couple $1 million. That was the deciding factor. That's why he went to Tennessee. You're going to have to grow in this approach to free agency because that's just the way the league has changed now.
And I think that's I think it's an excellent point, and that's certainly part of it. I think as we think about dishing out, being smart about when you dish out that guaranteed money, because the one thing that I had said on Twitter last night that I still really believe in, and I think certain teams probably follow this, certain teams might maybe not, but I think the secondary is one of those things where year to year it's hard to be consistent. Like it's just hard to be consistent as a corner or a DB in this. You can have an unreal year and then the next year it does not look anything close to the same, which is why some of these corner deals, you really only see the elite of the elite getting these long-term contracts. They often will let people, and then they'll build this through the draft and maybe they'll hit on more than Chris Ballard has. But this idea that, I guess Charvarius Ward is someone for me, I would assume his market is going to be really large. And I think that that's something that the Colts could end up pricing themselves out of at a certain degree for good and not always for a bad reason. I think you saw for all the controversy with L'Jarius Sneed having an unreal year in 2023 and then obviously injuries played a huge part, but did not play to either way, how injuries or not, did not play.
He was on the field, yeah.
Did not pay to not live up to anything close to what his contract was. And then now Tennessee's shifting course and saying we want to build through the draft now. So it's one of those things where it's like, I'm not saying that free agency is bad whatsoever. I'm saying that you can have success kind of picking those B tier secondary players and they can take that step for you as opposed to let's just get the guy that had the unreal 2023 year and we just think he's going to do it again. And that and oftentimes that fails.
And I think that's something that needs to be said is I think you put it really well earlier where you said going into like attacking the secondary, it's going to be just as much about quantity as it is about quality. So if you can get, because right now, just on the defensive side of the ball, like they don't have the personnel to run what Lou Anarumo wants to run and what he wants to do. They don't have that. They're going to have to get that. So you might end up not seeing that big splashy L'Jarius Sneed huge contract, but you might end up getting 2 or 3 guys for the same amount of money, and those guys can play as well, if maybe even better, than that one guy. It's going to be much more. But like, there's also like, and I know where people go with this too, because in my mind, I kind of go to the same place where you look at it and we talk about the L'Jarius Sneed deal last year, but there's also the secondary market was very, very low on safeties where you had impact safety players signing for $5 million, $6 million a year.
I totally
and that was completely ignored. So that's not something where that needs to be ignored.
Like Jeremy Chin, I mean, I can't remember what Jeremy Chin signed for, but there was like Jeremy Chin had gone, Cam Curl had gone. There was
Justin Simmons was there forever.
Justin Simmons was definitely there forever. Now I don't think he had the year that he wanted in Atlanta, unless someone can prove me wrong. But
I don't think it was bad, but I don't think it was.
It wasn't Justin Simmons 2023 and what you thought you would get, and that's kind of part of it. So I think when you attack, I think this is just thing to say is like the top of the line DB, and I know we're getting into like March conversations, but like when you think about what they need for the defense, I'm thinking
so
about
here. So I know I hate doing the whole like PFF thing, but it is a great tool. Like it's a good tool for grades.
good starting point. It's a good starting point.
It's a good starting point. So he had a total grade last year of 59.9 overall grade, which was good for 113th out of 170 safeties.
So yeah, it was not that great. So what I would say is that like a lot of these guys that you touted for how they played last year or 2-3 years ago, this is like the one position where you can't just guarantee that they're going to do it again. It's tough. And that's why I think you saw teams like I think Philadelphia is a great example that overhauled their secondary essentially in 1 year. Darius Slay had played really bad in 2023. He's had a really nice 2024.
Yeah, and they went and invested significant resources. First 2 picks in the draft.
Yep, and then obviously with Cooper, that's a great haul that they came in through, and then obviously they got
Cooper DeJean, 2 guys.
They brought back CJ Gardner-Johnson. So like this is the I think that there's a lot of ways to get there, and it doesn't always have to be signing the top guy. I'm actually a lot of the times I'm skeptical of the top guy at this point with this trend.
Yeah, they're like these guys. So like a guy like Brandon Stevens, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the type of guy I think could be a really good value signing for this team. He kind of fits.
I'm all over Christian Fulton at the moment.
Christian Fulton.
That's going to be. He is the when I say perfect, like that is exactly what Lou Anarumo I think is looking for in a corner, and I think that's something that I can't tell you where the Chargers stand in terms of if they would bring him back or not. But if he does, I think that's something where you get competitive there. So that, in my opinion. So I think the other thing that I definitely wanted to talk about as well is how this affect potentially some of the guys that are current free agents for the Colts and whether those guys are going to be brought back. And now we're playing a little bit of a guessing game because it does sound like Lou is going through and evaluating it himself. So we almost have to guess what he's thinking in a lot of ways. But I could see a scenario, and Landon and Marcus, let me know what you think, that Grant Stewart is the only guy that they bring back next year from the defensive side of the ball. Because I think, and let me give you my reasoning for this. I think Dio is going to have much larger of a market than we think for his inside-outside versatility. That's something that I'm not sure. I mean, anyone has a need for that, but I'm not sure that the Colts will be willing to invest that much in a player that probably they would think to invest resources elsewhere, and he would go get a deal somewhere else.
Yeah, they're going to have to choose between him and Quiddy, basically.
Exactly, and that's the tough situation that they. I mean, it's a fine problem to have, but they'll have to look there to see what they want to do. Now, I think they would love to have him back, but I also think that when you look at the results, there's going to be, and I know we were just saying about how they've lost these deals. I do think that there's, for their own guys at least, and really in general, there has to be a line where you have to be able to walk away. And I think that the one thing that you can say, and it hasn't necessarily led to a lot of results, but it's good for changing those results, I guess, is that the Colts don't have a lot of bad contracts. They don't sign a lot of those. The guys that got paid deserve to be paid, right? I think the one quote unquote bad contract that they have out there is due to injury, and it was Michael Pittman Jr. So like everyone is pretty much getting paid what they deserve to be paid for the most part. So I think that that's one of those things that they'll be happy to walk away. And then I think EJ Speed is kind of a toss up. Again, I could see linebackers in need, and I could see a team that plays a different style of defense finding EJ Speed more attractive than what they would in Indianapolis right now.
Yeah, for sure. It's going to be an interesting process to see who they keep and not. Once you said Grant Stewart, I couldn't stop smiling because I was like, yes,
and I think I think it's for the special teams a bit. Like, he's the guy that you can come on and he can just continue to play special teams. I think that's why Doolin. I wouldn't be surprised if Doolin gets signed back later in free agency just for that reason of the special teams element. But yeah, I just think that when they look at this, the theme of the Chris Ballard presser was let's bring in new blood into this defense. Now, whether he lives through that or not, I don't, or whatever everyone's perception of we're going to add new talent to the roster, whatever that is, it's not going to be a full run it back. He point blank said that's not happening. So it's not like he's just going to re-sign EJ Speed, re-sign Dio, re-sign Julian Blackmon, and just say, whoa, here's our defense. I don't think that that's what's going to happen clearly. So
well, and you can't do that, like you mentioned, it's probably going to end up being like, in order to make the roster work and this defense work, especially at the secondary level, where you are adding not only just new players, but you're also adding more bodies to that room. It's going to have to come at a cost of another position. And right now, the defensive line is probably going to be the cost on that. Not necessarily. I mean, and it's not like, you're not losing out. When I say like the defensive line is going to be the cost, I'm not saying, you're going to move off of DeForest Buckner or, Latu's going anywhere. Like, those starters are pretty entrenched there. But a guy like Dio Dengbo, who, like we did for Justin Simmons earlier, the overall grade there, and this is where tough conversations need to happen, because you can have all the talent in the world and sometimes it's just not working out. But a guy like Dio was 76th ranked overall grade, 42nd overall in pressures. Are you going to be willing to pay? I mean, and that's very.
I think he's going to have a market. I think he's going to have
and I think market. I think the talent's there, but like, that's just the average production. You're going to have to kind of take off those rose-colored glasses and say, like, hey, I know we've said this a couple times on the show, and I know you've really kind of preached it. Is sometimes you have to be willing to part with good to find great. And that's the position they find themselves in,
or part way with good to find a lot more good. Like, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like I don't think when you, as I'm starting to think through and try and put myself in Chris Ballard's shoes, the more that I'm thinking that they need to find legitimately more, the more the needs on this team grow. I wouldn't even, defensive line and offensive line are always going to be a need, but I don't think that when you look at the contracts coming down the pike, like I don't think Samson Ebukam is going to be on this team next year, unless they are absolutely sure of his from a health perspective. I think that the defense, if Samson and Dio both walk now, I think edge rusher becomes a need for your team. You're going to need some sort of rotational 3 technique, because DeForest Buckner's not playing that level of high snap counts, and
Taven Bryan
couldn't be trusted. Those guys are always.
Raekwon Davis, probably not going to be bad.
Raekwon Davis probably there. We'll see. You definitely need quality nose guard play. So we'll
and this is a good draft for that as well. That's like, there's some really quality defensive tackles in this draft.
And those are guys that I think that you can invest in day 2 of the draft. Who put Taven Bryan's season? That was one where I honestly, the end of 22, I still stand by this. The end of 23 wasn't that bad. I think it was worth just keeping him around from a competition or depth standpoint. He did not play well at all in 2024. So when he had to kind of be DeForest Buckner, which no one else can. So I think there's a lot of, I think you can make the argument there's needs on almost every single position on this team, except left tackle, left guard, 3 technique. But even then, you want a rotational piece. I think you can make an argument for pretty much Mike linebacker. I don't think or nickel. That's not going to be one punter. Like, you could realistically upgrade it almost every single spot. So starting running back, although I think you'll want to add depth there. So there's a lot of needs on this roster, or a lot of opportunities to get better. So eventually the Colts are going to have to bet on someone, right? Like, they can't fill all of them. And I just think that when you look at where the market dial is going to get, it's just going to be tough.
Yeah, for sure. And, from Loose Presser, he mentioned tackling, so I'm pretty sure that's going to be in the market for whoever can tackle. Mentioned Grant Stewart, so I was like, he had a job. So I got him tackling anybody. So other than that, he also mentioned about holding players accountable, whether they play good or bad. And, from last season's circumstances, a lot of players that spoke up talking about the locker room with the Eagles and things of that nature. And then from Ballard's presser, you talked about how Shane Steichen was holding people accountable. I was 50-50 on that. And Lou from the presser said straight up blank he's going to do that. And, a lot of players might not like that.
So here's the thing about that. Is I don't want to sit up here and act like Gus Bradley wasn't holding guys accountable or Shane Steichen wasn't holding guys accountable.
This is everyone's favorite word in Indianapolis.
Dude, I hate it. I can't stand it. Accountability, it can't. I mean, like you can have coaches that do, and like I do think that they do need kind of a hard ass mentality a little bit to where it's like, look, if you're not doing what you're supposed to do, you're not going to play. Like I do think there's a place for that, but accountability needs to be player led and it needs to be self accountability. That's the most important thing they've lacked. And DeForest Buckner said it whenever he talked about it. He says, like I can get up here and I can preach and I can talk to these guys till I'm blue in the face, but if you're not having that self accountability and you're not holding up your end of it, there's nothing a coach can do about that. There's nothing DeForest Buckner or Zaire Franklin or Shane Steichen can do about that. Accountability needs to be player, like self-driven from a player. And I think part of, and I know we talked about this during the Chris Ballard thing, but that's part of the thing of running it back and rewarding your own for mediocre results and mediocre play is guys got really comfortable because they knew, hey, this team's going to take care of me if I just show up and do, if I just show up, basically. If they draft me and I show up, they'll take care of me. There wasn't that huge risk of like, if I don't, pick it up, I'm going to be out of a job.
Got to bring that competition in.
And I think that there's going to be that. Like I do. Like I think that like obviously the defense is the thing of the top. I think it's everywhere, right? Like so at the end of the day, the Colts can't fill all these needs. They're going to have to bet on someone. That's why I think we both brought up Carlisle, where it's like that just seems like a great place that if they can't find a guy at that price, like that feels like a good bet to make with where a guy who flashed a little bit.
And he's a good fit.
Yeah, I think so. Here's my thing about Adetomiwa Adebawore, and I'm not privy to what's going on in the game planning sessions as a rotational three technique. That feels like a player that will make the 53-man roster at some point. But for all the athletic ability that he had, this would be his third D-line coach now, or second D-line coach. He's assuming that they don't move on from Charlie Partridge. And Taven Bryan's still getting snaps over him. So that, to me, when we're doing 2 years of that, that's something that I think Adetomiwa is probably a little bit too far away to just bet on him.
And I retweeted this earlier because I know they were talking about this. I can't remember the podcast, but I'd retweeted this. It might have just been yesterday, but it makes sense. It's like your only impact on defense can't be as a pass rusher. Like if you're along the defensive line, you can't just be a pass rusher. Like there are pass rushers
in this defense. No,
that
Lou does not like this stuff. No.
Yeah. I mean, like you have, the NASCAR packages and stuff like that where you're getting into these third downs. But if you cannot set the edge, if you cannot affect multiple areas of the game, are you really impacting the game at a high level? And the answer is no. And that's where we've gotten into this like Latu conversation with Jared Verse, is everybody keeps bringing up. And like, this is not I'm not going on this tangent on this podcast because this is not turning into.
Sounds like you're going there.
So. No, it's not turning
God
into.
Dang it. We was almost
session.
there.
No, it's not. Like Latu is going to be just fine. Nobody's saying that. But when people talk about Jared Verse, there's a reason.
Really affect the run, yeah.
Yeah, well, there's a reason why everybody's like, well, look at the snap counts. Look at how much more Jared Verse played, and this is his production. There's a reason why Jared Verse played that much more than Latu is. And it's not because Gus Bradley. It's because one of them affects the run at a high level, and that's Jared Verse. He's a guy that is an every down player. Unfortunately, Latu is not there yet. That doesn't mean he can't be. He's just not there yet. He doesn't have the anchor. He doesn't have the bull rush. He doesn't have the ability to set the edge at that level. That's why he did not play the snaps Jared Verse played. That's why the production's different. That's why Verse had a better year. It is what it is. That's not saying he can't do that in the future. That's something I'm sure he's going to be working on this offseason, especially if he's going to be in that Trey Hendrickson role in this defense. Trey Hendrickson is a guy. He affects multiple areas of the game other than just pass rush.
So, yeah, and that's the getting into just before, so we don't have to go super long. But the last thing I definitely do want to talk about is just kind of a little bit of the differences up front. So a lot of the times we talk a lot about the wide 9 defense, which means your defensive ends are in a 9 technique, which means they are outside of the tight end. If the tight end is on the line, very wide. And this defense, you will see that, but not nearly as much as you did with Gus Bradley. So they're going to play a little bit more 6 technique, which means you're going to be head up on the tight end. And a lot of the times that means that'll help you with some things from the interior perspective, but it requires a little bit different technique from their front mechanics and how they go about fitting the run and all this kind of thing is be totally different. So they're going to need safety. I mean, if you're a secondary player, you got to be able to tackle. I think that's in every defense, but in this one, and you got to get up there and play the run, but also be able to defend the pass. Their safeties, Von Bell and Jesse Bates, obviously were really versatile there. The difference is a lot of the times is you're not just going to be playing as a force player. You're going to be playing in some of the more interior gaps in this defense. So I think Landon's right. Like, it's going to be tough to just be a pass rush only player. I don't think that Latu is just that. I actually think he had some moments against the run.
He flashed for sure.
I also think
notably against tight ends, he overpowered a lot of tight ends.
I think it was a philosophy too. Yeah, he did, and that was. I mean, you love seeing that part. So, I think just to kind of put my closing thoughts, because I think there's a lot that I'm looking forward to, because I'm still learning about this defense, and I'm trying to learn something new every day. Is that the one thing that I think that you can get excited about is the change in scheme, and that the Colts will be in the conversation, maybe not leading it, but will be in the conversation of some of the cutting edge defensive things that people do. It did not take me long to find clinics and different stuff breaking down some of this stuff and how cutting edge it is. Now you need the players to do that, and I think that's the next step about finding those players. But I think that the Colts are no longer in the dinosaur age of schematic defense. They're going to be up there at the top. I think that's the best way to put this. And I think overall, I think the last thing I want to address, because people talked about how awful the 2024 Bengals are, and they're totally right. I'm not going to sit here again with the rose-colored glasses that Landon is saying and act like this guy is like the Nostradamus of defense, because that's not like. If he was, then 2024 would have gone better for him. He wouldn't have been available, right? At the end of the day, he's going to have to go prove it like everyone else on this roster is going to, right? But if we're going to talk results and we're going to talk 2024, 2 seasons ago, the Colts now have 2 guys that were top candidates in the head coaching cycle, both on their staff, and Shane Steichen and Lou Anarumo. I think it's a good process and a good bet to make that these guys just didn't wake up and forget to coach or wake up and forget to find new ideas on defense. I think that this is way more optimistic than I think we were about the Gus Bradley hire. No offense to Gus Bradley, but I think that there's a lot of more reasons. Infinitely. There's a lot of reasons to be optimistic about this one. There's some reasons to be skeptical, and I'm not going to deny those. Like, 2024 was awful. You go look through the film; it was not good, and and you don't just get absolved with that because your front office said they want to invest all this cap in 3 players. So, like, that's an exaggeration, but you know what I mean.
I believe only 30% of their cap was invested on the defensive side of the ball.
So it's.
But I think the biggest issue, and this is from some Cincinnati people, the biggest issue they had was, one, there wasn't a lot of growth from players that they drafted. So they did invest draft resources into.
Now, that's a chicken or the egg argument?
Yeah, exactly. Now,
Like,
was
draft
that on the
player?
coaching staff for those guys not taking the jump, or was that on the front office for not evaluating and selecting, not
And they have a
obviously
small scouting staff, so the coaches were involved in that too. So I think overall, just to put a bow on my personal thoughts, I know you'll probably want to close with something like that. I'm just saying I'm very excited to learn more about this defense. I think there's going to be a lot of changes. I also think that there's some unknowns. I thought last year it was so easy to predict what the Colts were going to do in the draft and in free agency. I don't think that's the case this year, because Lou could go in and say, we need to trade Zaire Franklin. He's just not going to fit my scheme. I don't think that's obviously not going to happen, but like, I'm just saying, like, there's going to be some unpredictability. I think it's going to make this offseason fun, but I think that you'll watch Colts games on Sunday and feel like X's on a chalkboard. The Colts had good game plans to stop the other team's best players. And I think that's the most important thing in this league, that we get caught up with, look at this crazy stunt and this pressure and look at how much stress this puts on. And then we just forget about the fact that, hey, let's just double Malik Neighbors because he's really good at football, right?
Yeah.
Like,
well, that's like, sometimes it's like, it's the acronym KISS, right? It's like, keep it simple, stupid. And that's something that I think Bill Belichick did, because Bill Belichick ran a very multiple style defense too. He game planned for the opponent. He wasn't just completely stuck in a similar, in just like, this is what we're running, this is what we're running every week, this is our scheme. He was very much game plan dependent, and that's what Lou Anarumo is. He will morph this defense based off of what the other team does well. You will see different styles of defense and attacks on a weekly basis. But one of the things that I always loved about what Bill Belichick did is what he would, watch the film and he would say, okay, like, this guy's not going to beat us this week. He's like, you can beat us with anybody else. This guy's not going to do it.
Like, if you go play the Texans and
Kansas City,
and let's say Xavier Hutchinson goes for 100 yards. Now I'm going to be upset, but at the end of the day, Nico Collins didn't, and you're playing with left hand.
Yeah, so this is similar to kind of the way Spagnuolo kind of attacked them last week. Even was they put, they put Trent McDuffie on Hutchinson. Mm-hmm. And they said, okay, we're going to put our best cover guy on here. It's one-on-one.
We think our guy's better than your double two, single one.
But then they bracketed,
Yeah.
You know, Nico Collins with their second cornerback plus a safety over top. And there's like, okay, we're going to double this guy. He is not going to beat us. If Xavier Hutchinson beats Trent McDuffie, we will live with that all day, every day. But we're not letting this guy take over the game.
Exactly.
But there were so many times when you watched, especially in the Colts, Texans matchups, where you would have to watch Nico Collins complete, like there would be no adjustment, and it would just be a guy on an island with Nico Collins. He would torch them. I don't think that's going to be the case moving forward. That being said, there's a reason why the sentiment of it's Jimmy's and Joe's, not X's and O's. There's a reason why that exists, right? You're going to have the horses to do it. You're going to have the players to execute. You're going to have them live up to the standard that they set, not only just in the locker room, with guys like Buckner and all them, but a personal standard. And I think that's where you get more veterans in there, more competition in there. You can draft rookies, and that's all great. And I do think they should attack it early. And that's a whole other thing we'll get into. But I just think that the secondary specifically, that should be where a lot of free agent veteran resources are kind of attached to, because it's a lot to ask rookies, at least maybe, 1, 2, like if you take a guy in the first round, you're obviously going to play him. Right?
Yeah, of course.
But if you're taking these guys and, and Chris Ballard's kind of what he's done is you're taking these 5th and 6th and 7th and undrafted free agent rounder guys in the secondary, and you might take 3 of them and you're throwing them in there, as rookies, and you're like, okay, this is what we're doing on defense. These are going to be the guys. It's a lot to ask of them. I think you need a veteran presence, specifically at safety, to really the way that Chris Ballard talked about the 3 technique is the engine of what we want to do on defense. That is no longer the case with Lou Anarumo. The safety is the engine of this defense. And I think if you're going to make the investment, that's where your big investment needs to be.
And as you always know, players become available that you never expected. There's a lot of unturned.
Oh
So
yeah,
I think all in all, I'm optimistic, but also realistic about the fact that, like, as I've said about this entire year, I don't care what they say in the press conferences. I don't care what's the training camp quotes are. I'm interested on stuff that has literal evidence attached to it. And the evidence that I have is that the Colts brought in a lot of candidates, loved that process. That was a serious thing to do, to bring in the top guys that were available that were not your former DC already. And then this is a guy who has a resume that is legitimate. So 2 steps on a very long offseason. But all in all, I'm optimistic and excited about the fact that I think we get into this thing that 2023 feels like the normal, and it's just not going to be so. At least and if it is, then we were absolutely just point blank lied to. So that would be my thoughts. But
Yeah, for
yeah.
sure.
I mean, it's gonna be interesting because we were DMing earlier about this, and I had said it's going to be really interesting that the success of this defense and really this team and roster as a general. And end of the day, I mean, like, of course, it all comes down to Anthony Richardson's growth. That's what really matters. And if he puts it together, they'll probably be okay. If he doesn't, they're probably not going to be a good football team. But it's also comes down to, in year 9, you're asking Chris Ballard to completely 180 on all of his beliefs, whether that's in defense, whether that's in the draft, whether that's in free agency, specifically in free agency, and on what he believes in on defense. You're asking a guy going into year 9 to completely blow up everything he believes in and execute an entire 180 game plan this offseason. And that's probably going to determine where this roster lands next year and whether or not he still has a job. And this is coming from the guy that says, this is what I believe, and if it gets me fired, so be it. So that's going to be the test. I mean, is he actually going to change? And we'll find out here in a couple months.
And so yeah, and I think that's for me, like, and I don't think most fans would say this, but for me, I understand the how uncontrollable this thing can get. So I'm not expecting them to be like, okay, we're going to go on spot track and find the top 5 free agents, and the Colts need to sign one to say that Chris Ballard changed. I think everyone here knows
this isn't Madden.
Yeah, this isn't Madden. You can't just like sign guys and just offer them unlimited. Like, he's going to be smart about doing it, but I do agree that I think we're all on the same page. By necessity, by what he said.
There's also some things that are outside of his control that do hamper what he's able to do.
So many things.
I just meant organizationally, and we'll just leave it.
Organizationally, but also you can't control things that happen out. Like, let's say they might. I could see a trade happening. This year. I don't think that that's out of the question. Whether it's their own guy that they don't think is going to fit and they want extra resources.
He traded 14th overall before.
I don't think he'll do
he
that.
might do it again.
I don't think he's doing that. I
don't think so either. But
if he is, he better figure out what he's doing.
Maybe Denver doesn't want to pay Pat Surtain.
So, I don't want to give a first round pick for a DB ever.
I will give 14th overall for Pat Surtain, and we'll be okay.
All right, fellas. Well, this was great.
Yes. We shall definitely. Hopefully, the Colts will give us some more news in the future. And as of now, we will let you guys know if we're going to drop a show or not. But other than that, you guys just have to be patient. Enjoy the finals of this playoffs. It's coming down to an end. The Super Bowl is right around the corner. It's getting interesting. But it's been a great week. You guys stay safe as well. Hopefully, there's no more snow in any areas because I'm over it. But that is Landon. That is Colts Film Room. This is Marcus. And until next time, you guys stay safe and enjoy the rest of the weekend.